For those that don't know, you are based out in Long Island, and you work with a paranormal firm out there that does investigations in the area. And one of the things you had mentioned before in a previous interview that I've heard you had done not too long ago, where it's it seems like there is more of an opportunity where there are more cases for you to go out and investigate several paranormal, I guess, what's the best way to describe it, situations, if you will. This is the part that I was actually really curious to start off with you, because I'm not sure exactly if there is a criteria that has to be met for someone to reach out to you and say, "Hey, I'm having an experience at my home or in this location here where there are X, Y, and Z's going on. Would you guys be able to consider looking into this?" Because it seems like it's out of the norm where I'm seeing things, either, as cliche as it may sound, things fall off the shelf, noise that are being made when no one is home, or lights are being turned off. So I'm curious to see about what it is that you guys are looking out for to select what would be considered a case worth investigating without having to possibly walk into either a trap where it may be a waste of your time, or anything of that sort that would really kind of pinpoint what it is you guys need to make sure is fitting those criteria for you to go out there and investigate to verify if everything they're are concerned about is in fact legitimate.
Right. Well, what we do is we have like a questionnaire form that they fill out, and it asks like general questions about their claims and their house, medical history, any type of medications they might be on, if they are taking any drugs or anything like that. If anybody's calling us for help, regardless of whether or not stuff happens, we kind of want to go just to give them a little bit of peace of mind. If it's like a quiet night for us, that's a good thing for them. So when we give them our evidence and they don't have a lot of claims, then they might feel like, oh, but this happens to us all the time. So then we will come back, because sometimes it might take more than the first time to go to have something happen, if something happens at all. But we also go in and we try and debunk things. So we will go in and we'll check the EMF levels and the carbon monoxide. I think that's the bad one. Carbon dioxide. Carbon monoxide. Yeah, the bad one. So we go with the meter, and we check and make sure that there's no leaks with that kind of stuff.
I see.
So because that can lead to hallucinations and stuff. So we generally just try to help. What we do try, and we send a questionnaire form, and then we'll send another one that's like 100 questions or like 50 questions or something like that. And it's kind of redundant. But we do that because if they're serious, then they'll fill it out. Because a lot of times around Halloween or a scary movie comes out, they just think it'll be fun to have people come in, and we'll schedule something. And then it's like a joke. They'll have like a bunch of friends there. It's happened a few times where it was like, okay, so, what do we do? Why are we here? So, where they didn't actually have anything going on. They just wanted to see if we would come. So that's annoying because we've, put off, not that we put off, but we have scheduled cases. So if somebody else who actually needed help could have gotten sooner, that's why we started doing that. That's helped a lot.
So when you guys were dealing with people who are more or less pranking you guys under those circumstances here, was this something you guys were aware of could be a possibility you guys would be running into, where there are going to be some people out there who want to take advantage of the situation because what they see on TV, and maybe they don't understand the ramifications of what you guys are doing as far as how serious you guys are taking it. But when you're dealing with that and walking into that, do you guys have a either a policy, or is it one of those things you guys kind of play it by ear about, if this is all a joke, then just pack up guys and head on out? Or do you guys coordinate with them about, listen, we're not going to be doing this here because clearly this is a joke, because we show up for X, Y, and Z, and I can see your friends hiding in the corner, whatever the case may be. So like, how do you guys go about in establishing what the protocols are going to be in place for that once you discover it's all fake?
Well, it would be safety measures. So depending on the type of people they are, I mean, it's whether or not you want to confront them. We would politely say that, we're just going to pull out. Because we do say that there can only be like a minimum of, I think it's 3 people in the home. contained into one room.
Oh, okay.
If they
Why is
stay
that for that?
for contamination reasons, if they're all over the place and stuff like that, and they're watching TV and they're walking around, it's like, how are we to determine that it's not you watching TV in the other room that's making that noise?
Oh, I see
So
what
if we
you're
could
saying.
kind of contain it to one area, then we
I see.
know, okay, this is where it's coming from. So we try the best we can. There's some special circumstances where that can't happen, but we'll still work with them, but knowing, where the things are. And so in that situation, we have had it happen, and we just politely explained that we wouldn't be able to do the investigation if this is how it was going to be. They were drinking and they were partying and stuff, and I guess the person felt really bad afterwards when he saw like that it was a serious thing, and we investigated anyway, because we made a really far trip out there and we actually got stuff. So it was worth it. But he told them to leave. So they all left, and then he stayed, him and one other person.
So, did that happen often when you guys get people who are calling or reaching out to you guys to do an investigation where either a lot of it were not legitimate, or maybe they were legitimately concerned, but it wasn't a legitimate, issue that
Haunting. Yeah.
right. So like, because the thing is that, from, I'm going to say it like this, I don't think a lot of people are very smart about differentiating certain things and and actually doing their due diligence and verifying some stuff. I think a lot of it's more like face value. So,
Right.
with like, for example, with myself growing up, with my Hispanic background, there's a lot of superstitions that
Right.
I've grown up with here that, frankly, I don't believe in anymore. But I know that as a kid growing up, it was a very common thing for people to believe that if you do X, Y, and Z, the devil will appear, and then you hear these stories, and it becomes a tool in a lot of ways as a way for the fear to be more or less controlling the
Yeah.
kid or the situation. So a lot of that, I think, is where some people are very unwise in how they go about that. So, and I understand that there are some people who are legitimately concerned and they will reach out to you and say, I have a problem and I need you to look into this here.
Right.
But can you tell simply by either a call or a letter or something that's been sent out to you that you may realize that this doesn't pan out as something that is really legitimate because they're concerned about X, Y, and Z, and that's not really what we're all about. So I'm curious to see how you guys are able to filter out some of those things before you even go out there, because it sounds like to me, and you let me know if I'm wrong, that if someone reaches out, they fill out the questionnaire and everything goes through accordingly, then you go out of the way, make the trip, arrive, and then from there you figure out what's real, what isn't real, and then who's legitimate, who's not legitimate, or if they are legitimate, but the concerns are unfounded, if you will. So I'm curious to see how that is also filtered out along the way prior to stepping out and going to investigate.
How often it's that case without
Right.
a haunting. So I would say it's probably, I'll be honest, like we're very hard on our evidence. Because we're more scientifically based, ironically that I'm a medium, but we are scientifically based. So I would say for majority of our cases, we can figure out what could potentially be causing that. And again, we would go back and do multiple investigations to be sure, but most of the time it pans out like that. Oh, it's just, older houses. So you have your loose piping, the house settling, and that'll shake that stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Areas with old wiring and, the water heaters and stuff, you have high EMF.
Mm.
And again, that can cause hallucinations. So we've had a lot of those cases. I don't know if you've ever heard the term of a fear cage. Sometimes, a fear cage is basically a small area of high EMF where you feel just trapped and anxious and you don't know why. Like you're looking over your shoulder, your heart's pounding.
Oh, I know now I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Right.
I just didn't know it was called that.
Yeah. That's
Okay.
just this, a term that they've come up with for it, I guess. So sometimes you'll have that in like basements and stuff. So a lot of people tend to be like fearful of basements because they'll feel like that rush of whatever. But when we do have stuff, I mean, we have stuff and that's pretty crazy, and then you want to try and help them out. So we offer like house cleansings, but we do the best that we can. If we feel like we can help them, if they are any type of religious person, then we try and refer them to maybe their church or something. And sometimes it's just, you know, just keeping up on it. Sometimes you have to do like the cleansings seasonally and stuff like that. And just because you bring in a lot of your own icky energy too.
When you say cleansing, what exactly do you mean by cleansing? Are you talking about like a
Like,
the way I'm thinking is like, because I grew up Catholic, so I'm thinking like cleansing. You know, bless the rooms and holy water things. Is that what you're referring to
so
about cleansing?
I don't do the holy water stuff.
Okay.
And the frankincense and myrrh
Okay.
stuff. But, sometimes we'll do like black salt around the house, sea salt, dead sea salt. That's supposed to create a protective barrier, keep negative things out. Um, you know, Sage or
Okay.
Palo Santo, things like that. Um, Florida water. It's all like witchy stuff, but
Okay.
it helps. And a lot of the clients that we have done it with haven't complained.
So what's the most common thing you guys get when it comes to someone asking for your assistance in investigating, some concerns they have at the home? Is it mostly just like, because it's hard for me to kind of get a grasp about someone calling in about there's noises in the bedroom, but because in my mind, and I guess because I watch a lot of movies, but I'm not saying that I'm being ignorant to that, but it's like I'm picturing that if someone is reaching out to you because there's a concern that I saw a figure in my room, and then when I turn on the lights, that figure is gone. And then when I go downstairs, I see another figure. When I turn on the lights, that figure is gone. And then I'm picturing that's kind of more or less the concerns that someone would have, and they do a whole walk through the house or the home wherever they may be living, and they can't find anybody out there or in the home or even outside. And then they may think that there might be some spirit here that it could be good, could be bad. I don't know, but I'm concerned. So I'm going to call some paranormal investigators to look into the matter here for me. So that's how I'm picturing here. But I will hope you can just clarify as far as what the most consistent things you guys are getting when someone is reaching out to do an investigation at their home or whatever that they're concerned that may be an issue that where it requires for you to get involved.
I'll be honest, not every case is the same. So there's lots of different types of claims that we get. I guess most common would be hearing things, footsteps maybe in the house, seeing somebody move, walk down the hallway, or like you said, you see somebody and then you don't. Hearing movement of items, but maybe they're not actually moving, or things actually moving. I feel like that's the most common stuff, just audible stuff. Some people have had claims of feeling like they were being watched or touched while they were sleeping.
Okay.
Things like that.
So has there ever been a point where when you are out there doing an investigation, I'm assuming that, you obviously, because it seems like everyone from what you're describing here to me takes it very seriously, but does it ever come to a point where there might be a case by case scenario where, there's not a lot of, maybe for lack of a better term, momentum as far as like finding something that would be, this is, we really got to step it up a notch here because of, what we're seeing is a little out of the norm for us here. And we have to really consider other factors that we may discover something that we've never experienced before, because it seems like it's almost a routine type of investigation as opposed to something that would be, to use, let's say, poltergeist as an example, where it's outlandish, crazy circumstances, but that's not something that I hear very often. It's more or less
Right.
very standard stuff.
Right.
So I'm wondering if you guys have experiences where there is that, nothing to the extent of poltergeist, of course, but something that would be considered out of the norm, where this is not a common investigation, where it seems like maybe it felt very dangerous, or maybe it felt like it was something that you guys had to really pack up more than you normally would to really find out what's going on, because there's some unknown element out there that you guys are not very unsure of, that could be potentially dangerous, and there's some uncharted territory that you guys are walking into, and have to find a way to prepare for that. So I'm curious if you have a little bit of that along the way, or if it's just all standard for the most part.
No, we have had those situations
Okay.
that we on, but however, it was unexpected, where that kind of shift in energy would change. That's what occurred with me with where how I got a spirit attachment. That was a location that we had been investigating for about a year before it happened, and it was just such a random thing that happened. I accidentally channeled something, and it stayed with me. And there was, they call Mount Misery Road in Huntington, Long Island. And
Okay.
it's pretty popular around here. I think if you're into paranormal, you've probably heard of it.
Hmm.
That has supposedly potential demonic activity. We've had experiences there that were pretty crazy. That was featured on I think my ghost story and
Oh,
America's
I
Most.
think I may have heard something
Yeah,
about that. This was like a few years ago, wasn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember that. Okay.
Yeah, so it has a few stories because it's attached with Sweet Hollow Road. So you could go there and have nothing happen at all, or you could have that shift happen and totally feel like, oh crap, like what do we do? We tend to leave, you know. So
Just pack up and leave and no warning. Is that more or less the scenario?
I mean, we gotta go. Safety first.
Right.
I'm no, by no means a demonologist or anything like that. So I
Mm.
mean, um, I don't want to I am poking the bear, I guess, by doing what I'm doing. Obviously, I've had things happen to me that people would think I was crazy for, but
Well,
I'd
it's but so tell me about that side of, because you said you're not really a demonologist, but it sounds like to me you have some knowledge about how that works to, I would imagine, to some degree, because the thing is that, there I, I'm I'm aware of certain aspects of certain scenarios when it comes to investigation of that sort. But a lot of times it's more, I see that in this. So I'm going to use the Catholic Church as an example, where exorcism is a big thing,
Mhm.
where they have this a protocol too, where they verify that the person is, are they,
Yeah,
are
yeah,
they having some sort of mental issues, or what's
right.
their history. Like, they have a protocol to make
Yep.
sure that it's legitimate. But when it comes to demons and things of that nature, when you're dealing with some aspect of concern with a lot of people having genuine fears of, it's I don't hear about that stuff very often. And when you do hear about it, it's kind of like a question mark, as if though they're the people that have experiences prefer to stay out of the limelight, if you will, because they
Mhm.
don't necessarily want to expose themselves for whatever those reasons may be. And I understand what those reasons may be, but it's like, without enough education on that, it's hard for me to really comprehend what exactly the dangers of that is here. Because coming from my position, I'm not sure if you can tell, I don't I don't know a lot about it, because it it it, it interests me, but I'm questioning it, because I come from a standpoint where, is it are the people legitimately concerned about some things that is legitimately a real thing? Because I've grown up with some people who have believed stuff, and then all of a sudden you come to find out it's complete bullshit.
Right.
So it's something that I question a lot of people, as far as what they're are they concerns for the real things, or is it just a mental issue that they're dealing with here, or are they just blowing smoke and just getting attention? Because that's also a very common thing that I've come across as well too, as far as hearing stories of that
Yeah.
sort. I think The Exorcist is one of the major stories that dealt with that, where the kid in which the book was loosely based on had a history of doing stuff like that, and that's a very common thing that I've come across, more so than the actual story. But you don't hear about the stories that people may have gone through that may in fact be legitimate, but you hear the other stories which you find out may not be legitimate, because there's a selling point that is able to they're able to cash on, because of the story that is so elaborate and so crazy that it has to be made into a film, it has to be made into a
Right.
series. So that's the position where I'm coming from here. And I'm sure you may run into that from time to time where when you come across that. But there's a question I meant to ask. So I'm sorry for going elongated here. But
Yeah, it's
if
okay.
the point is that when you're dealing with a subject matter, in this case, like say like demons, and you don't know that much about it, and if you're walking into a scenario where you're having to deal with that, are you fully aware as far as what the potential ramifications are for having to deal with that? Or do you prefer, you know what, guys, this is not in our field of expertise. We should have someone else do this altogether because this is uncharted territory for us. And therefore, we should probably just avoid this scenario because we don't know what we're walking into here.
Well, so if we were called into a home or a business, or we were at a location where we felt like there could be a potential for demonic activity, what would that activity be? What would be the key things that would cause us to think that? Is that what you're asking me?
Right, more or less. But so
Okay.
because the thing is that I'm curious to see how if you guys. The thing is that I think what the real question I was trying to ask because is that if someone is telling you there's a problem, but they're maybe afraid to tell you what the problem is, and they think because they're paranormal investigators, they may know how to deal with that.
Mm.
So therefore, like I said, I think there's certain people that may have experienced that, and they may be legitimate, but we don't hear about those stories. So
Right.
there might be a scenario where someone may present something to you, and then when you arrive, you're like, "Holy shit! We're walking into something that we have no expertise on."
Right.
Why didn't you just tell us from the very beginning? Because I didn't know who else to turn to.
So, one of our that is so rare that happens. Of course, everybody that messages us thinks that I'm not gonna say everybody, but most people think that they might have a demon in their home. So if they hear a bang or it's a demon or it's a negative ghost, and that's mostly because of probably TV and movies and Hollywood and all that stuff. So there was a member of our group that before our group was in another group where they were called in, and they had a case where there was that occurring. There was, if I have this, I might have this story a little off, but the key points are the same. Okay. So kids playing Ouija board, split level home. It affected not them, but the family below with a small child, probably around 8 or 9, maybe 13 at most, and an infant. And right in front of their face, the CDs started flying off the thing, and the girl was scratched in front of them. So right away they called. They have some demonologists that they know that have been given permission by the church, basically, to be demonologists. Like they were asked by the church to do it. So they called them in, and they exorcised the house because the people were not possessed, but the house had a demonic presence.
Interesting.
They got the family a hotel room for a few nights while they did this, and they really helped take care of them. They wound up moving, and they still kind of had supposedly some things, but
like traces of that kind of lingering around.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. There's a case. Have you heard of the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose?
Oh yeah, that's Anna Michael.
Annalise Michael.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
So and that went through the courts and everything like that, and you could go either way. So it really depends on your belief system too. Either you're going to believe it or you might not, unless you experience it, right?
Right.
So it's tough to just say, yes, this happens. Take my word for it. So I've personally not come across something where there was somebody possessed. I have gone into places where there have been horrible, very bad energy, both intelligent energy and residual energy left over, where that could be just as tough. I'm not gonna say as tough because you're dealing with demons, but
have you ever actually been genuinely scared of whether you're investigating something or looked into something prior to an investigation, or something you may have read along the way that really got you spooked, where you realized that this field can be, I wouldn't say questionable, but what's the best word I can use? It's concerning, where you may feel like it, maybe I should take a step back and reevaluate how I'm going to go about doing this moving forward here, because I'm starting to notice how dark it can actually get with certain elements when it comes to investigating something of this sort. In this case, let's say like demons being a major thing here. So for you, have you ever felt any concerns about more or less of your well-being because of what you've come across or what you're learning that you could potentially come across with any potential investigations?
Well, I grew up with this my whole life. Like my dad was really into horror and paranormal, and my sister was, and so that's I grew up with knowing all about demons and angels, and spirit attachments and shadow people and all that other stuff. It wasn't until I had my own personal experiences, especially at, I would say, 2 locations that really hit me pretty hard, where I was like, oh, damn, um, this is a lot more than, because especially I've been doing it for, I think, about 13 years now. And so it becomes kind of normal, where
Okay.
you get your basic, hey, EVP, or you get nothing at all. EVP is electronic voice phenomena. So that's something that you could pick up on an audio
Right,
device.
right, right.
So, and so you kind of get like this kind of numb to it almost, where you're like, oh, okay, well, nothing's going to happen. And then so when something does happen, it could kind of like jolt you. And, every once in a while you'll have a case that like just, it hits you in the gut, whether it be like emotional reasons or physical reasons. For me, the one case I was talking about was emotional reasons. The other case I was talking about was emotional and physical. So it was tough.
Do you have you ever come to a point in doing this here where you felt like maybe you may want to walk away from it? And I'm not saying because it's too daunting or stressful. It's maybe because there is something else you would rather do with your time. And when I ask the question, I'm asking because I'm curious about where your mindset is when it comes to this. Because again, this is a field that again I am not familiar with here at all,
Mhm.
and it's not. As far as I know, I've never come across anybody who has do this more or less for a living. But considering the type of work that's involved with this here, it's not something that I would think that would be. I'm not sure if you looked at it as a way like this can be a career for me, because there are people who need help, and then people that need to look into some things to kind of to get some clarification about what's actually going on in their lives, in their homes, and when they're very in their livelihood or whatever the case may be. That maybe somewhere along the way you realize that maybe it's not panning out as I was hoping it would be, because like for example, like you're getting calls and getting requests, and some of them may turn out to be fake or it may not be legitimate, or it's just very generic stuff. And then you may realize that maybe I should just hold off for now and just focus on other things, and then I'll come back to this later once I get everything put together for myself, because this is not working out the way that I anticipated. I hope the question makes sense with what I'm trying
Yeah,
to ask here.
it does. I've never felt that.
Okay.
It's just something that I'm a sensitive, a medium. So growing up, not knowing what was happening to me, and why I was seeing things that other people didn't see, or people that other people couldn't see, um, it, it frightened me. And so when I found people that could understand that about me, accept that about me, and saw that I could help other people move on, and hopefully help spirits move on, it kind of, I don't feel like I really belong doing too many other things. Like I feel like this is something I'm meant to be doing. Unfortunately, it's not a paid job, so
Right.
I can't make a career out of it.
Okay.
Um, but unless you get a TV show,
Yeah.
but I don't even know if that's something.
Do you is I mean, so when you're doing this here, you really are doing it basically at the end of the day because you are very passionate about it. You're finding um, you feel like there's a purpose for it, and a purpose that you feel has a good meaning behind it. So it's clearly obvious you're not doing it for money. I'm sure it would definitely help out if you
It
could
would
do it. So
help.
that way, yeah, I'm sure it would. But it's just that it's interesting for me to hear that because you said you've been doing this for you said 13 years now. Is that what you had said before?
Yeah, I've been doing
Okay.
it 13 years. The group's been around for 20 years.
So so then leads me to the next question. Then when with all of you guys coming through, I mean, I'm curious about the collective thoughts for everybody. Where the group has been around for 20 years, you've been doing this for 13. Um, is there ever a rotating membership, if you will, where
Absolutely.
okay, so explain to me about that because if you've been doing this for this long, for 13 years, and the group's been around for 20, are you one of the more seasoned members, if you will, or are there some people who've been there for the full 20 years and then others
Right.
who have been around there just as much as not a little bit less, a little bit low, it may vary as far as the amount of years been there, but as far as the rotation is concerned, is it like a consistent thing every week, every month? I mean, I'm kind of throwing numbers out there
Right,
every
right.
year. Like what's the general
So
consensus for that?
I would say, okay, so the founder of the group is still in the group. He's original 20 years.
Okay.
And then there's me, the next longest running full-time member. Before me, there's Andy, but he's a guest right now. So he doesn't count as a full-time member. No offense, Andy. So I win. I'm just kidding. And then Rocco. So I mean, we have a bunch of other members. I would say the turnover rate. Uh, okay, so if three people join, one out of three will probably stay um, more than a year.
Okay.
If you make it past 2 years, you're probably in it for a while.
Okay.
Most people quit because it becomes too much work or it's too heavy or life happens and they want to move forward and do other things because our group is it's run like a business. We actually just became nonprofit, so it is a
Okay.
business now. So we meet weekly and we go out weekly if it's okay, like the weather's okay.
Right.
So we'll do outside locations and stuff. And that's on top of events that we might have over weekends. So that's like a lot of analysis. So it becomes a big chunk of your life. And then some people have families and stuff. So eventually it's just like, they want to be with their family and you can't blame them for that.
So explain to me then about you've been at this for 13 years, so you're this second senior member there. So how much of this group does it consume your time? Because I'm assuming you're working full time, and then you have this book here that you've been working on, and you're intending on writing more books, and then doing this on the side. Um, is it difficult to manage the time, or are you really that devoted to, okay, as long as I get my job, I have a job, do my job, and then the free time that I do have will all be dedicated to this group for me to be able to focus all my attention on that and not have to worry about other things, say for example like a social life, if you will. I mean, I know you do have one because I've seen your social media posts, but the thing is that I'm curious about how you manage that for yourself, because if people are leaving for reasons that I want to be with my family, it's a lot of work, and I'd rather be doing other things. I'm curious to see how you go about handle that for yourself for this length of time and being able to stay consistent with that. And if at any point, if you ever felt like maybe I want to take a break from the group and I'll come back when I'm prepared to do so.
Um, so right now I'm not working full time.
Okay.
I have a hair salon business that it's kind of by appointments because I'm focusing on my book right now.
Okay.
And I have a few books that I want to release after that go along with that first book. Um, so in between that and doing the modeling stuff, I do the paranormal stuff. So I'm just constantly running around like a chicken without a head. And I just, I don't know how I find the time to do it. I just keep doing it because I can't stop. I can't, tell them no, I can't show up and help you, with your problem. Or, I can't let people down that are buying tickets to our events to investigate certain places and be like, no, I'm not showing up because I don't feel like it. There have been times where I've definitely wanted to quit the group. The experience back in 2019 really affected me hardcore. And I completely shut down. I didn't know if I wanted to do this ever again, but I wanted to find out why it was happening. And so I kept going with it. I think everything has its highs and lows. You do something that you love, but sometimes it'll start to, if you do too much, it starts to feel like a job. And so I don't think taking a break from it necessarily the whole group. I think just taking some time for myself, doing small things for myself helps. If that counts.
Do you feel like though that so for you, so for example, you have, because I know that because you have a pretty good following on social media, but when it comes to running into people that you're meeting for the first time in any sort of social scenario, where do you tell people, I do, I have a business and I also do modeling, but I also do paranormal investigation. Is that something that you are opening up to people off the bat to tell them that this is what I do?
If they ask me.
Okay, but it's not something you go out and tell people if it comes up in a conversation where if they're asking you, so tell me a bit about yourself. Do you feel comfortable in telling that, I do this, but I also do paranormal investigation, or do you hold that off because there might be, some sort of maybe to some people's eyes, some negative connotation behind that. So,
right.
So what's your take on how do you go about doing that?
So, so I kind of had this huge awakening this past year and a half, I would say.
Okay.
And I like to be a very honest person. So if you're asking me about what I do and I tell you, and then you're offended in some way by what I do, then you don't need to be a part of my life. And not to sound rude or anything like that, right. But I'm not hurting anyone.
Right.
In that sense. So if they have questions about it, that's fine. And I don't mind answering them. And if they don't agree with it, but they're not rude about it, that's also fine. But if they're attacking me or making fun of me for it, then it's something where it's like, well, then why am I wasting my energy with you? And I kind of just move forward. So, I don't necessarily fight with them, and I don't necessarily say that. I just kind of just pull myself out of the situation. And that's the last time I talked to them.
Do you get a lot of people who you converse with that are very, maybe, I guess rude is the best way I could describe it here, where they look down on that. Mm-hmm. And for example, if they say that stuff's not real, why are you doing this here? You're not getting paid for it. Like, how do you, I know you just answered my question, but I'm curious about mm-hmm. that angle of this particular scenario, where someone that looks at you and is condescending and tells right. you, you're not getting paid for this here. Why are you doing this here? That stuff is not real. You clearly are wasting your time. So if you're having someone that tells you that, how did you deal with that before? And then as the years have gone by, how do you deal with it now?
So I used to shut down when people would say stuff like that to me, and I would get embarrassed, and I would, I would get really upset. But then I realized, everybody's entitled to their opinions. They don't have to believe that it's real. I know what experiences I've had. Mm-hmm. I have evidence that can back up my experiences. And again, you might not believe it because you weren't there, and that's fine. So now I either invite them to come along with me, or I ask them to give me a piece of their hair. They right away, tone it down.
So I'm curious about the hair stuff here. So I hope you don't mind me go off topic here, but with the hair stuff, what does that indicate to them when you're asking them, let me get a piece of your hair? Are you trying to prove that I'm going to do something that will carry on with you? Not saying as a form of a curse, but I'm just curious about what it is that you do, what are you insinuating with them when you're telling them, give me a piece of your hair if you don't believe me?
Exactly. I'm just poking fun at them. Essentially,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
I wouldn't curse anybody or anything like that. But I say that because they don't want to believe me, but they wouldn't willingly give me a piece of their hair
I
because
see what
they're
you're saying.
afraid
That's
that I
actually
would
really
do a
smart.
curse on them. So that's
I
my
like
way of
that.
saying that. You could also, go a lot deeper with it, but I don't want to offend anybody.
No, no.
But so that's how I handle it, and you'll be surprised. Most of the people tone it down real quick. you know
That's actually really smart. I like that. I think that's a really
yeah.
good approach to handle that here. Okay, well, so we talked about you're talking about how you were taking some time and want to promote the book, which is I think a good time for me to want to bring this up here because um what I found interesting about this the poems you've written here is that you have mentioned before that you were more or less pretty much like a conduit. You're not writing things from your experiences, but rather writing it from others' experiences, other spirits, if you will, that have shared with you some insight about their lives. Because a lot of the things that I've come across here, that I've before we more or less kind of officially started, that I wanted to delve into here with you, is because it's a lot of darkness, but it seems like it's a lot of yearning for wanting to get with their loved ones, if you will, whether it be a boyfriend or a girlfriend, husband, wife, or whatever the case may be. Because even then, there was one particular poem that I came across where it was clearly a woman who was with a man who she had genuine feelings for, and he had feelings for her too, and then refused to leave his wife despite the fact that they were clearly having an affair.
Yeah.
And she was obviously very distraught by that. And that there was a lot of that in your book that I've come across here. Very seldom that I ever read something that was really upbeat. It was, I think, maybe one or two that I remember offhand that I came across that seemed a little bit more, I wouldn't say jovial, but more upbeat than some of the other ones
Yeah.
I've read here. So the thing is that I'm curious about with this is because it's a lot of heaviness for it's so I liken it to somebody who is, if I'm writing someone's thoughts down and they're telling me this, and I got one person telling me the exact same thing, another person telling me the exact same, to me, my saying might get a little bit overwhelming after a while. We're like, this is getting kind of, I wouldn't say redundant, but it's depressing in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. So for me, I was curious about how you go about in dealing with that, because again, the poems you write here, I did enjoy it, quite frankly, but the things that you write here are that, again, are not your experiences here, but they're someone else's experiences.
Uh,
Seem can be a little bit daunting.
well, actually, it's hard to explain this proper.
Okay.
So they're my, okay. So I had channeled this spirit and it stayed with me. And
Okay.
so when that happened, all of her feelings, so the book is all one spirit.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
I
So
got you.
all of her feelings flooded into me at once. So that was overwhelming. Feeling it all hit me at one shot. And my head spinning. I terrified my group members. They wouldn't come near me for a little while. They didn't recognize me. Some of them legit didn't recognize me. They were like, who? Oh, like I didn't see me. And so I can't say what I looked like, but I probably looked terrified, to be honest. That's probably why
Okay.
they didn't recognize me, just out of just me being because like what the hell happened, right?
I see what you're saying. Okay.
So and I didn't feel like me. So it was just so odd. And I know how crazy I sound. And I'll be honest, and I've said this before, if anybody else told me this, I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry that you went through that. But a part of me would be like, they're nuts, there's no way.
Yeah.
And that's, and I would want to investigate that because that's the investigator in me. So I don't mind people asking me questions about it, but I also, like I said, I have evidence to back it up. So this spirit, she, I feel, was a mistress to a man that she had fallen in love with. And when push came to shove and they got caught, or they might have gotten caught, he shunned her basically. And so this is going back to, say, like the 1600s. So if you think about, like, they had nothing they I feel like she just attached to this man and was really possessive and obsessed, obviously.
Mhm.
And so to have all those feelings flooding into me, and that's where the automatic writings come from. So most of the poems that I wrote are her feelings that I felt, my words, and her words, if that makes sense.
I think I understand with what you
Her
mean by that.
words that I'm putting into poetry. So
Okay.
I'm putting it into poetry, her feeling. I know it's so hard to explain. It's like, I feel like I wish everybody could have just been there for it.
Right.
You know, and
No, but I understand what you're saying. So essentially what you're describing here to me is that she's giving you the words, and I'm not saying you're interpreting it, but you are articulating it in a way that you're expressing it through a form of poetry to get more or less kind of get to the point, because poetry has a certain systematic way of writing where it's, maybe it's not the best way to describe it, but it's the only way that I know how to, is A, B, C, and D. So then you know, okay, this is the line, this is the line, this is the line. And because again, when I've read the poems here that I've come across, I got it right away as far as what is being described there. Some things a little more mysterious than others, but essentially I figured out what was going on. But the part that I misunderstood with what you said previously was that I was under the assumption that it's various spirits that were telling you this here, and you're writing it for all of them. But now that I'm looking back at it now, there's a consistent theme that now I realize that that's what I was misunderstanding here. So now it makes more sense.
So I do have writings from other locations that I've done that with. However, this one just had so many more things that came out of it. You know, I still write from it today. So
are this going to be, is there going to be a continuation, more or less a sequel to that particular? Okay.
Yes, because it doesn't, you know, that was just the beginning of it. And then it goes, I feel like, you know, it starts with the desperation of wanting him back and wanting to acknowledge the love that they had. And then it goes into the, you know, the anger part of the whys, you know, like, and then it goes into the, I think the more of the empowerment part of, I want to take my voice back. And, you know, part of the reason why I wanted to put this into a book is because I felt like she was so silenced. And that's why her energy is still that strong. And that's why she wanted to share this. Because I can't say for sure how she passed. If she did it herself, it sure feels that way. Or if,
it's
you
kind
know,
of the impression that I got. Yeah.
So, and I feel like that's because she couldn't speak her voice of, speak her, I don't want to say her truth, because I literally can't stand that when people say, but she wanted to speak her, what happened to her, and she couldn't, especially during those times. You couldn't talk about that kind of stuff. And so I feel like I just wanted to share her story for her.
So with this book there, this is what I'm curious about with you, because I do appreciate and I understand with what you're doing with and writing this out for someone else here, but what exactly is it that you're hoping to accomplish with writing this book and having a release? Is there some sort of not saying an ulterior motive, but like a motivation for you to want to release it in this capacity here, where you wanting to showcase about what this person had gone through at the time, and then be able to give an opportunity for them to again express their voice under the circumstances they were dealt with at that time, and then have the opportunity to be able to do so here. So I'm curious if it's more about having you give him that voice, if you will, to do so, or are there something else that you found as a way to express, maybe understanding what they've gone through, maybe to some degree you understand it, and then it help you understand how to express yourself, and this is a way for you to be able to do so here. So it may sound, I hope the question isn't too convoluted, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from with that.
I think I understand where you're coming from. So my goal with wanting to release this book isn't necessarily for I'm not trying to get famous. I'm not trying to do anything like that. Like these are very heavy thoughts and feelings, and I felt them. So regardless of whether or not I lived them, I felt them. And I've been in a position where I have been at low points in my life. And I feel like if somebody can see that and see that other people feel those things but are still here, then maybe it can help them. And I feel like if it helps one person feel understood, then that's great. And that's all that matters. And I just, like I said, I just really wanted her to be able to get her voice out there. That's what she wanted. I basically said, tell me what happened to you, show me what happened to you. And then that was that, and after that, my whole life changed. And you could talk to anybody that I know without me around, and they'll tell you the same thing that I'm telling you about that kind of situation.
Do you feel comfortable doing this here? And what I mean by the question is this, because um, you do strike me as someone who seems very shy. So, because you've said that before as well too, but I did pick up on it in the previous interview, and I'm kind of picking up on it now. But the reason I'm asking this question is because, to be able to use this as a way to, more or less help someone express their emotions, if you will, but you being the conduit in this case. Now here I am talking to you to, yes, help promote the book, but also to elaborate on further details to some degree about what it was that you had experienced, to be able to share these stories, if you will, and then having to be more or less the voice to do so. So I'm curious about if this is in some way helping you, and maybe finding something about yourself along the way that before may have been difficult, but now you've gotten the ability to be able to communicate in this capacity or in various other capacity you had struggled with before in the past, that this more or less is kind of in a lot of ways helped you to be able to do so here. So I hope the question is a fair one to ask in that regard.
Yeah. I think the whole attachment in itself helped me in a way that I didn't think it would. Um, my personality changed a lot. So yeah, I'm still shy, but I do feel like I kind of, like I said before, like I wanted to take back my own life. It kind of gave me a drive I never had before. Um, and I don't know if I'm answering your question proper. If that's where
Well,
you were going with it, but
no, yeah, just do it, because the thing is that I'm not sure what your answer is going to be, so I'm curious to see what your perspective is. So it's whatever that you're experiencing. I would hope that I understand where you're coming from, because that's the reason why I'd ask, because I want to know where that comes. Because like I said before, the reason I'm asking is because, as we're talking, I'm noticing little things about certain things along the way that when I ask certain questions, it's because I'm trying to be very careful how I say it, but it seems like there was some struggle to some degree in talking about certain things.
Mhm.
But then there's certain things along the way that I noticed that, boom, you're able to kind of go off on a tangent to some degree, where you seem much more comfortable. So a lot of times, if I find somebody who is like that, usually I may find something that has helped them in some degree, that helps them to be able to express themselves more where they couldn't have done that. And I'm wondering if this has in a lot of ways had helped you. So you were
that
answering my
had
question. Yeah.
yeah, it has
Okay.
helped me in that way. And when I talk about this in general, it's very heavy because um I lived it, and it did affect me a lot. um and I'm leaving myself open to people who can potentially mock it
Yeah.
or mock my experience,
Right.
and to have experienced something where I felt like my soul was basically ripped out of me and replaced with a new one. And having to literally get to know myself all over again was it's a lot. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm very vulnerable, and I guess that is where I kind of connect with the attachment in itself, because she was a very vulnerable, um, in a very vulnerable state too. So I feel, at times it's difficult to talk about it because I do feel like she's still attached with me. So I get the certain anxieties of it. Um, but I don't mind talking about it. I'd rather talk about it than not talk about it.
So when you're talking about having some of the anxieties that the spirit you're talking about sharing with you, and you're more or less feeling it, is it because this is the part that's new to me too, that I'm not aware of here when it comes to how that works. Because I'm of the mindset right now where I can separate certain things and remove whatever emotional attachment that certain things may have bothered me before don't necessarily bother me now, because I have the ability to be able to just say no and walk away and be able to deal with it in that manner. But under these circumstances for you, if you're, because of the person you are and the emotions that you're being dealt with here with the spirit you're talking about here, are you able to separate that emotion where the stress and the distraughtness or whatever the case may be that this person had previously felt before, they're still feeling now, that they're passing on more or less onto you? Do you have the ability to just to say, I get it, but I'm not carrying that weight here, so cool off with that? I mean, is that kind of a fair assessment to make?
Yeah, we've gotten to that point.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, it was really tough in the beginning because again, I wasn't myself so much. So, and then there's a part of, sometimes when people have these spirit attachments, um, you kind of become each other's clutch. Like you almost, it's fearful to try and get rid of it because you don't know who you're going to be without it anymore. And I think that's the scariest thing
Really
for me. Yes. And I've
interesting.
heard that from other people too. I actually went to a convention, New Jersey Paracon, I believe.
Okay.
And there was a gentleman there that spoke of his experience with a spirit attachment. And I looked at my friend because I was like, holy cow, like he had the same, like I told people prior, so it made me feel good because I had already said it. So it wasn't like I was like, oh yeah, me too, me too.
That's what you're
So
saying. Yeah.
so I had said to them prior, I felt like, my eyes changed, my eye color changed, um, you know, and certain things like that. Like I just felt so connected, and I said, like, I'm afraid for it to leave because I don't want to feel like that empty feeling or whatever. I don't know who I'm going to be. And he said the same thing. And the person next to him was like, yeah, and his eyes changed. And I was like, and I noticed that my eyes changed, but then it wasn't until my mom said something to me. She was like, your eyes changed. And I was like,
Are you talking about like the eye color
yeah, the
changed?
color.
Oh, okay. So you're naturally brown eyes? Is that what I'm seeing here?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
they're a weird color now.
Okay.
It's
What's the
hard to
color
see it
now?
on the
Yeah, I can't see very well from here.
it's they're almost like a greenish, brownish,
Okay.
orangish. It depends. Like they literally change.
But so are you naturally brown eyes then?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So
So then explain to me about this here, because so this part is interesting for me then to want to delve into with you, because you're afraid of the detachment and the void that would be left for you. Um, it, I understand where I'm coming from with this here, because I don't know very well how this stuff works. So if it comes off, I hope it doesn't. But I genuinely want to know what this means for you, because if if you're feeling concerned about a void that will be left behind if the spirit leaves you, um, wouldn't I mean, is it easy for you to be able to say it's okay? It's fine. It's something that I've dealt with here, and now that she's stepped away, I don't have to worry about this weight on me anymore, because I don't have to deal with it right now. Not to say that in a negative light for yourself, I'm not saying you're indicating that here, but I'm curious about how you would be able to just get up and just keep walking and not concern yourself about there's a missing piece of me here, and I'm afraid that nothing else will fill that void, and or I'm concerned that I'm never going to. I mean, I'm just curious about what your mindset is, because that's the part is where I'm most interested in how you learn to deal with it now, with the concerns you have about that detachment that more or less you may more likely or could possibly go through here.
how do I deal?
So, well, maybe I'm hoping I asked the question correctly, because I'm thinking and talking at the same time. So, you talked about there's a concern about having the spirit walk away, and there's a void that's left over, and you don't want to detach yourself from that just yet, is what I'm
Yeah.
understanding here. The question that I was trying to ask was that if because you just mentioned before that you come to a point where like enough's enough, just cool
Yeah.
off. But because of that experience in that moment, I figured that to some degree, once that detachment is officially done, that it would be a relief in a lot of ways where you feel like, okay, good, I don't have to deal with that now. Not to say that you're being just being rude about it, but what I'm saying is that because of that moment you had where, all right, enough's enough, and now that you're having that detachment, weight off, lifted off your shoulders. Therefore, I don't have to worry about dealing with that anymore because I've gotten their story, I've put it out there, and I think we've come to a point where we can part ways. Now I can move on with myself and move on with my life and be happy with what I've done and be happy with what I can discover along the way moving forward from here. So that's, I hope the question makes sense. If it didn't make sense the first time around.
Right. I think that so I feel like it's just the fear of that's what it's going to feel like. It's not that I don't want to necessarily. I've made jokes and said that I didn't want to let it go, that it was like my pet ghost, but in reality it is very heavy, and if it can go and have peace and just go, that would be okay too. I just got dizzy saying that. I get anxious, but you know, I don't, I feel like, yes, that's exactly how it would feel. It would feel like a weight lifted off of you. Absolutely. But it's been hard to get it to go.
Okay.
I have had people work with me on that, and then I just stopped because it just wouldn't, it just wouldn't go. Excuse me.
Is it, is this something that you have dealt with growing up, and that separation of anxiety, is that coming a bit from your background as well too, where you feel that same sentiment in this case with the spirit, where you're afraid to lose that connection? Is there a little bit of that as well too for yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. That was deep.
Oh, well, I'm just curious because it's because I'm wondering, because the thing is that there's a lot of things that I'm hearing here, and I'm curious to see what your perspective on that here, because I really want to understand where you're coming from with that here, because if there's a concern for a disconnect here, then in my mind, it has to stem from something in your life where, so it's like, it's almost as if though, the way I can describe it is where there is, it's almost as if that you attract people that are very much like, or in this case spirits, I should say, that are very much like you, because they either, from what I'm understanding, they sense the same sensibilities you have that they have, and therefore they understand that you will understand them. So
Mhm,
for you to be able to communicate and articulate these thoughts and these words into a poem here, they more or less understand that, okay, she gets it,
mhm.
and therefore um eventually I can move on. But you, on the other hand, are like, okay, so I've done this here now. What else do you need me to do? Because there's still more that you're clinging on to. And again, not to get personal with you, because that's not what I'm trying to do, but I just want to make sure that I understand where that comes from here. So I hope it's a fair question for me to ask you in that respect.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I guess, you're when so the separation issues, I guess, would be from, my father when I was younger,
Okay.
divorced family. Um, he I would see him on the weekends sometimes. Um, just things like that. Um, I have an issue with people. They will be consistent, right? And then just like that, you
Yeah,
never
I know
hear
what
from
you're
them
saying.
again.
Yeah.
So I guess I had that connection to that side of it, but I don't necessarily know. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense, but I don't know that it's the same thing per se.
I gotcha. Okay, so then here's what I wanted to delve into here next year, because there's something that I mentioned before we more or less kind of start here that caught my attention about you, and because hearing this and you sharing your story, and I do appreciate opening up here. So I hope I didn't made you feel uncomfortable during with
Not
the
at all.
question here. Okay, but this is the reason why I want to ask this next question here for you, because when it comes to the things that in this case with modeling and you going to conventions, being a horror fan, right? The reason I'm leading to this here is because I'm wondering if a lot of that is stemming from it's a reprieve for you. Like, okay, I get to do this here. I don't have to worry about all this other stuff. This is my comfort zone. I enjoy meeting people at these conventions, dressing up and talking about horror, whatever the case may be. Because I'm curious about how you handle that, and if it stems from that, you being able to relax in this environment where I'm not saying that you're not relaxing doing paranormal investigation here, but there's a distinct difference about a comfort level that you have with doing paranormal investigation and the comfort level you have with going to cons and hanging out with your friends and uh, watching horror films or whatever the case may be. So I'm wondering if there's a distinct difference about where you get enjoyment and have reprieve for yourself as opposed to getting enjoyment and finding a purpose for what you do and you're very passionate about in paranormal investigation and the other things that are related to that as well too. So again, I hope the question makes sense with what I'm trying to go for here.
Um, I think that I enjoy the separation of the two
Okay.
because when I'm doing conventions and I'm doing stuff like that, um, I'm doing things again for me. And
Right.
yes, it does take my mindset out of that. So when I do my Velma Dinkley cosplay, I
Yeah.
don't have to deal with the things that have run through my mind, um, and things like that. So that's that's a lot of fun for me because it's like a total alter ego. And I enjoy meeting new people and all that other kind of stuff. So that's something I really enjoy doing. And then, because I feel like the paranormal part of me is the more serious part of me because especially I take it so seriously after what happened.
Mhm.
But also a part of me is closed off because of what happened.
Right.
That little I don't know if it's like there's nothing's gonna top that for me.
Oh,
Or
I see what you're
if
saying. Okay.
it's just almost like into a protection mode. I don't really open myself up too much anymore in that field too much, because I do and I don't. I'm very careful because I'm terrified um of that happening to me again.
I see. So with you because I know you're a horror fan too. So here's what I'm curious about with this here, because the paranormal investigation and then you being a horror fan, obviously there's the reality and then there is fantasy, if you will. Um, does that does that kind of change your perspective on how you look at films now? Because I would, because like for example, like there's for example, let's talk about like fighters, people who are boxers. They do this for a living and then they watch movies like that's not how it is in the ring. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work like that, and they may more or less not want to delve into that because they know the realities of it, and films and television don't do it right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an example. So for yourself, being a fan of horror, did you ever have that kind of perception about, because I've been through this here, this does not work for me anymore in this capacity where it used to when I was a kid growing up or up to a certain point in my adulthood?
No.
Okay.
I love
So
horror.
why is that for you though? Knowing having your path here with important paranormal investigation and being able to maintain that love for the genre where it didn't deter you from thinking the opposite of what most people who experience that may step away from and say that's not reality for me.
I think that I've always had a love for horror, but I think in fact it pulled me in more. I think a
Okay.
lot of people who watch horror are people who have lived horror. that true horror fans, I feel like a lot of people that are true horror fans
That's a good
are
point.
people that have lived horror. And I always say this, like the bad guys in the horror movies are not necessarily the bad guys. It's
Yeah.
the people around them that are pushing them to, you know, don't
Yeah.
make fun of the guy in the corner and maybe he won't follow you to your house and kill you. You know what I mean? Be polite. That's the moral of the story. Be nice to your neighbor. So I mean, not in every situation, but that's how I feel. I feel like there's a certain comfort level in as weird as that sounds, in a horror film. You know what you're getting out of it, I guess.
Right. So, and again, I think that's really interesting that you said that, because yeah, in my mind, I would think that it might have sustained certain enjoyment out of these,
Right.
because of what you do on more or less kind of on a full-time basis here. But has it ever come to a point? Okay, so for example, like you talked about the Annalise case and the exorcism of Emily Rose. To me, that was the last horror movie that I saw. This was back in 2005. So yeah, because the movie came out in 2005. I saw it in theaters with a friend and his family. But that was the last movie that really got to me at that point. Like really, really got to me. And I also love horror too, but I'm wondering if you watch a movie and think, considering your background and considering what you do, if you watch a film, let's say in this case, like The Exorcism of Emily Rose, where there are some pretty factual things about the court documents that were used in that film, although it was based in Germany, but this is based in America. But when you look at a movie like that, you say they got it right. But then you look at a movie, say, for example, like I'm trying to think of a film that deals with more or less kind of like paranormal investigation. I guess Delivers from Evil, I think, is one of those films, if I recall correctly. It's been a long time since I've seen the movie. But when you look at a movie of that sort that more is in line with what you do with the paranormal investigation, do you have a little bit of like disconnect about that's not how it is? Clearly, they're amping it up. Like when you look at a movie like The Conjuring, which is based on the what's the name of the
Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Yes, thank you, the Warrens.
Yeah,
there's a lot of conflicting stuff of what actually happened, what hasn't, for when you do the research and you realize that, okay, so obviously for the films they amped it up and it works for the movies, but when you look into the actual case, you realize that it's nowhere near as entertaining as it was in the film. But when you look at something like that, do you have a little bit of disconnect when you watch a movie of that sort and you realize that, yeah, I'm okay with this here for what it is, or I have a problem with it, and therefore the enjoyment factor is there, but not to the degree that I could have gotten it if I had not been in this field?
So I think that it's funny sometimes to see what they do with it. Sometimes it'll come out and we'll be like, oh, okay, well, here we go. Let the calls come in. Because it's just so crazy that I feel like I can't take it seriously. So it's fun for me. I don't get scared from it. It's just fun for me. So I do get annoyed though that, they will say, oh, it is based on a true story, but like how much of it is true? You know what I mean? Yeah. So like it allows people to think these crazy things might have occurred that might not have occurred. And then it just generates a weird hysteria.
So what's your take on that though? When you're seeing like Ed and Lorraine Warren, they're notorious for these are the stories that I've heard from several people that were interviewed, that they would say, we looked into this case here, but we can't find anything that was really worth, putting it out there to sell. And I said, well, just make something else. What we always do anyways. That's kind of the story that most of the people who have dealt with them in that capacity that have shared that. Whether sure or not, I don't know. But what I'm saying is that when you hear these type of stories of paranormal investigators, in this case, like Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are notorious for what they do, but they're also notorious from other people who have said they are not legitimate at all. And they've made a lot of money doing this stuff. And they're one of the rare people that have been able to pull this off and make a living off of it, to the point where now they're selling their rights and now their lives are being told in the form of films and whatever else. So clearly they've banked on something that they were able to capitalize on. So when you're seeing that, do you have an opinion on the matter about how someone in that particular field is taking advantage? And I'm not saying taking advantage in a negative light, but taking advantage of the situation where they're able to make money off of that, but knowing the history, I'm not sure what's your opinion on their investigations, on their history, that you may feel like that you may have a bit of a problem with along the way. Because knowing the stories that I've heard and what I've read online and various other interviews that I've come across, I'm kind of I'm mixed about it. I don't believe them mostly, but the film is entertaining, but the story is not so much entertaining because it seems like it's more of taking advantage of the situation and it worked in their favor. That's what it comes across to me. But I'm
Right.
curious about your perspective on that.
So I think that any paranormal group um that tries to take advantage of a client for monetary gain is um and I'm saying taking advantage, you where you're just not legitimately helping them. You're making up false claims to maybe get more out of them or whatever.
Right.
I feel like is a horrible people. But for Ed and Lorraine Warren, I have heard the claims that, they were false
Yeah.
with what they were saying to people, and that they were just taking things and, for their museum and stuff. But I just don't know. I don't know them personally. And
Right.
I feel like I can't give an opinion because I've never had my own experience with them. So I can't say whether or not they were taking advantage of those people at that time. And as far as selling their rights for movies and stuff, I mean, I guess if a Hollywood producer had come up to me and wanted to to do a story on whatever, I mean, and you offered a certain amount of money, I can't say that I would say yes, but I can't say that I would say no either. But I wouldn't want them to necessarily change it to the point where it's not my story anymore, and I feel like that's what they allowed to happen, and I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah. So do you have, because you talked about this before in the past about your opinions on, you talked about cold readings, which I think for anyone who doesn't know is
Mhm.
essentially where a a medium would be able to kind of fish out some details, but
Yes.
it's very generic stuff where, so you have a relative who's sick and, everyone has a relative who's sick and has a heart attack, whatever.
Yep.
So it's very generic stuff. For you, on the other hand, I think if I recall correctly, you mentioned before that you don't necessarily do that, but you do have the ability to, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying, to do that, if that makes any sense. So if someone comes up to you and says, I want you to do a reading on me because I feel like there's something that I'm not clicking with here, and I need you to see if you can find out what I must do to better myself in this situation. So can you please do a reading on me to figure out what's going on? Because it can be a very thin line you're walking on here, where there are some, because from my perspective, if I were to have the ability to do that, I think I would be very reserved to want to do it for anybody, because
Yep.
the ramifications of like, well, you said this, was I
Yep.
said these things, but you didn't listen. You heard this, and I told you it's not that. Like there, because I would be very detailed in that respect if I had the ability to do that. But I wouldn't trust people to say, "Please do a reading on me," and then I'll take your word for it. I don't know if I would trust them to do that. So I'm curious about, because I'm already getting your expression here, how you
Yeah.
feel about that. But if you can explain to me about where that stems from and how you go about it moving forward, if someone comes up and says, "Please do one reading for me,"
I don't.
okay,
I tell them no, and I will refer them to somebody who might do that for them. I have a few friends that are in the field that I feel are legitimate, that I feel comfortable referring people to, because what I like to do is more of like the investigative side of it. I don't
right,
like the expectations from someone, because just because you want to hear from so and so doesn't mean so and so is going to come through, and then you're going to tell everybody that, whatever. Um, it is what it is. But I'm not a dog. I can't perform tricks on command, and neither can they, you know? So I like to give people readings if something comes through. I had a client of mine, I was doing a haircut one time, and I look over and I saw him sitting in the waiting area, except it was not him. And so, but I couldn't not see him. And I had just cut this person's hair that was waiting over there. So I knew that it wasn't him. And I was like, why am I only seeing him? So I messaged my client, and I was like, a name started to come through for him. And I was like, okay, does this name make any sense to you? Right away, yes, that's my late sister. And it was, a full name and everything like that. So I was like, okay, well, that's weird. I even like get freaked out by it sometimes. I'm like, okay, well, let's see where this goes. And this may not make sense. And I'll say that right away. I don't know where this is coming from. It may or may not make sense. I might be crazy, but I'm getting this for some reason. So I said that she was showing me that she was holding a little boy, and she kept talking about like Thanksgiving. And he was like, oh my God, no way. So he said that that was his sister who passed away, and that her daughter, his niece, was trying to have a baby. They were trying for it. And they weren't going to find out yet if it had taken. And then he had texted me a little while later. I don't know how many weeks, how many days it was, if it was days or weeks, but that she found out that she was pregnant, and that she did have that little boy around, I think it was around Thanksgiving. So it was really, really cool for me. So it's those moments like that I get really happy about, that I like to share with people, and that I wouldn't charge them or anything like that, but I enjoy mostly going into historic places and or people's homes, and telling them what they have there. And I don't know any of the claims before I go. I write everything down, and I'll talk to other members about what I'm experiencing and what I'm feeling prior to going in there, prior to hearing any claims, so that it's more validation for the client. I want them to feel comfortable with what they're getting out of me. And we go from there. And if it's like historical things, then we can try and look up the history and see if, we can validate some of those things for them. So
interesting.
That's what I enjoy doing.
Do you, what's the, because you've already answered my question about you don't do readings, but what's the one thing that you would refuse to do that's on the top of the list that you would never do in your field, that and it could be, in this case, we talked about you doing a reading, but something related to that, or something related to your field where you don't feel comfortable in wanting to pursue, no matter what the cost is, no matter what the if the person is willing to pay you for it, it's always going to be no, because for whatever those reasons may be, in that respective field for yourself.
Oh gosh, that is such a weird, not a weird question, but it's like we do paranormal things, so it's such a wide realm of things that people could ask for.
Okay.
So it's hard to pinpoint what exactly I wouldn't do, I guess, because you never know what somebody's going to ask of you. So I think it's just in the moment. If I'm not feeling comfortable about it, or if I feel like it goes against my own personal morals for myself, then I won't do it. So I won't necessarily go and play around with the Ouija board. Okay,
so explain to me about that, because I'm
smiling because I want to, but I won't.
Right. So there's a reason why I'm asking, is because in my family, they're very superstitious about this stuff, and that's something that they refuse to ever want to be near. I have one, and I got one for my wife, because my wife is into horror, as am I. But she is like, she definitely wants to test the realms, and it's weird because I don't, only because I just don't believe that. Because the thing is that I've heard, because I had an uncle of mine who said he did, he and a few of his friends had done it one night, and the piece moved in the middle, and they asked him questions, and they had the whole lights and whatever. So they did the whole shebang. But I come from a position where I will do it, but I don't expect anything to come out of it here, because I don't necessarily believe that if this thing is able to move, there is, it could be someone is moving it and they don't think they're moving, but they are, or they're purposely moving it and they're denying it. So I have the trust factor issue that I have with that.
Yeah.
But that's my perspective on that. So for you, you're saying you wouldn't want to do it, but you want to. Why wouldn't you want to do it?
Okay, so I wouldn't want to do it because I don't want to have to hear it from the founder of my group about it. No,
Oh.
I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. But because it's like you don't know exactly what you can communicate with, and essentially like the spirit's not using, it's not sitting next to you with its fingers on the planchette moving it, it's using you to move it, so it's moving it through you, so you're essentially inviting it into you to use your body as a tool to move the planchette to where it needs to be. And just because you decide that you're done with the game doesn't necessarily mean that it wants to be done with the game, and just because you say goodbye doesn't mean that it says goodbye forever. So you might be done with that game, but 10 years later, because there's supposedly no time, you know, they could just come knocking on your damn door and being like, hey, you want to play now at 3:30 in the morning with me and my demon friends? You know, I keep bringing them up tonight. I'm sorry.
That's
But
okay.
yeah, so I guess that's why I don't want to hear it.
I see. So it's a gateway to
It could be a
an
gateway
open
to other
invitation,
things.
right?
Yeah,
So that you don't want to be experiencing more or less here.
right.
Okay. So that's a big no-no for you at all. So if someone says, "Hey, investigation, and we're going to use the Ouija board to communicate," that's going to be an automatic no for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So here's what I'm curious about next year with you, because there are several stories out there when it comes to the history of places across the country, around the world. And I know you mentioned before that you would be very interested in wanting to investigate other parts of the country, other parts of the world as well too, where you want to be able to learn about those respective areas in the history.
Mm-hmm.
But is there a certain criteria that you have about what those investigations are that you're looking into? Because, so for example, like you have this is an example, a castle that's considered haunted somewhere in Europe somewhere.
Yes.
So something of that sort. Or I'm curious about, let's say, history dealing with, say, for example, creatures. Let's use the Jersey Devil as an
Okay.
example.
Cryptozoology.
Right. Exactly. That's the word. Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Is that something that you also will look into as well too? To, like, the Mothman prophecies, the Jersey Devil, the swamp, what was it called, the swamp Bigfoot over down in Florida, like those type of things, because those to me sound like it's a hit and miss. But I'm curious if that's something that ever piqued your interest that you would consider, because what you're mostly doing up in Long Island and the other very areas around the area, you step out of that area and you go to other parts of the country, and now you're exposed to other things. You realize, you know what, we've never done this. Let's try checking this out and
Yeah.
see what we can come across here. So I'm curious to see what is going to be that criteria that would be considered for you to want to try out, that you would maybe never consider doing it in Long Island.
So we do have a group within our group that study the cryptozoology part of it.
Okay.
So they were attempting to try and set up some investigations where we can do some stuff like that to we all thought that would be kind of fun to look for things other than ghosts. When COVID happened, that kind of got paused for a little bit.
Right.
And then this year's kind of been like a little hectic, catching up on other cases that we weren't able to get to. So probably by next year, we'll have a couple of locations set down that we want to go to. But there was a time where we investigated the Bridgewater Triangle with John Brightman, and that was the New Jersey area, New England. I can't remember where we were. Boston, Massachusetts. He's gonna punch me in the face because I just said New Jersey. But whatever. So they had puckwudgies there. They had puckwudgies there. There's these supposed little things that will lure you to your death. And one of our old members, sure enough, was like, "Oh, what's that sparkly thing?" And she's like going after it. She's like, and like it kept moving. So she thought, and she literally almost walked off the cliff. And I'm like, "What the hell are you doing?" She's like, I saw a sparkly thing on the floor."
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And so
Okay.
it'll lure you or whatever. So I can't say for sure that that was a puckwudgie or not.
I see.
I can't even tell you where we were because I have no idea. We were somewhere in the Bridgewater Triangle. That was
So,
cool.
I'm this is the thing that it's funny because for some reason when you said pudgewuddies, is that what they're called?
Puckwudgie.
Puckwudgies. I've never heard that before. I'm trying to see where.
Really?
Yeah,
They're
I've
supposed to
never
be
had.
like little tiny like troll things. So I never heard of it before then either.
Oh, I am. So this is the reason. Okay. So for the Hispanic culture, those are called duendes. Those are little
Okay.
trolls.
Yeah.
So, and they are more or less the same thing too. But
Okay.
the folklore with that in the culture that I grew up in is that they go after the children who are not behaving well. That's the
Okay.
story that they heard. It varies region to region
Yeah.
because my stepfather claims he's seen one, and but he was drunk when he told the story, so it's hard to say if he was telling the truth. But the thing is that it I know what you're talking about, but it seems like in America it's more like leap to your death type of thing, whereas in South and Central America it's more about we're going to get your children, and then there's videos of that sort of stuff, which at the time
Right,
I was
right.
very much into. Um, but again, that's the hardest thing for me to understand because it's every single country has a certain story about creatures or ghosts or whatever the case may be that have a very similar background, but they do different things altogether.
Right.
So you have like the Curse of La Llorona, which is something that I grew
Oh
up with, that I was
yes.
very familiar with as a kid. Then they made it into a movie, and I was like, it's fine. So it is what it is. So I'm curious about is there something that would put you at a pause where like, okay, so if we're gonna look into this in these areas here, we should really prepare or not do it at all because I am not willing to risk ourselves out there walking through these woods to find this in this case, let's say duendes or what do you call it?
Yeah.
Puck berries or puck what are they called?
Puckberries. Puckwudgies.
Puck wedgies. Thank you. Sorry.
No, it's puckberries are fun. Um, I think that's scarier than actual. For me, I think that's scarier than investigating ghosts because the ghosts may or may not be there.
Mhm.
They may or may not attach. I mean, but if the possibility of an actual Mothman or anything like that is around, I mean, what is it gonna do to me? So that's scarier, I think. Yeah, cool. But people that have claimed Bigfoot's been around, there was that wasn't there a group of people that were like in a tent that were like ripped apart and they didn't know what happened to them. Like, I don't want that happening to
Yeah,
me.
I've
So
heard
yeah,
that
that's
story.
freaking scary. So
Kind of questionable, I
that
think.
yeah, but like that and like Alien, I know, but
Yeah, yeah.
still, you
I know what
never
you're saying.
know.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Yeah. Well, so then again, like that's so essentially you're stepping out of more or less your comfort zone and you're willing to try and investigating other areas that you are normally not familiarized with, or at least something that you don't do on a consistent basis here. So, and clearly when I'm asking you that, I can see your excitement level just jump through the roof because it seems more something that you would are want to try and experience to see what that is like in those respective areas as parts of the world or whatever the case may be. So there's still a passion that I'm picking up on that you still have, but just in other realms that you would like to delve into here.
Yeah, I think that would be exciting. It would be scary. It would be fun. I like being scared. Weird. Um, I really enjoy that feeling.
Why is that for
Um,
you?
I don't know. I don't know why. I really can't explain it. I
Okay.
have been watching horror films since I was like really, really tiny. That's what we
Yeah.
used to do with my dad when we would go visit him. And me and my sister, like I said, we would watch it at home. Anything paranormal or horror related, we would watch. She used to read me those stories. Are you afraid of the No, not that one.
Oh,
Scary stories in the dark to tell,
yeah, that's the one.
or
Yeah.
to tell in the dark. Yeah. So, we used to read those, and so it's something I've always been into. I don't know why. All of it's exciting.
So for you, what would be non paranormal related, or let's say cryptozoology related, that you would also like to delve into investigation wise, that's completely out of that realm, that you would also like to look into here? Um because I would think that investigation works the same to some degree in various different fields when it comes to what you're looking for and what it is you're trying to discover along the way. But to do something in a completely different field altogether. So let's say, for example, like the Tasmanian tiger, which is considered to be extinct, but there are people who are claiming that they exist now. They're still out there, but people have a hard time getting glimpses of them. But people say they have seen them, but they'd never catch footage of that. Would that be something that you would also want to consider doing, and doing an investigation of that sort outside of the paranormal, outside of the cryptozoology, where it's something that is not, people are claiming but are not sure of, and that would be something that you may want to look into to possibly try as another avenue of investigation that would be more or less in the same line, if you will, about what you do, but with paranormal?
Um, I don't think that stuff would be necessary. I think it would be fun
Okay.
to look into it and see that kind of stuff. But I feel like I don't know why you said like Tasmania. So I feel like it would be just so hot out all the time.
It would be.
So I'm like, I don't know.
Do it at night, I guess. No,
I'm just making jokes. But yeah, no, I think it would be cool, but I don't know if that's for me. Like, if you're talking like archaeology, where I could go and like dig stuff up and investigate in that sense, like where this, what this piece belongs to. It's like that's something I'd be really into. Like, I love that kind of thing. So
interesting. Okay.
like, I'm a big history dork. So
Really? Okay.
yes. So I love that kind of thing.
Do you, so here's the thing: when you're, as the years have gone by and you discover more things about yourself with regards to what you're passionate about, what makes you happy, what piques your interest, do you feel like for yourself now, up to this point, do you have a better sense of yourself, where you know who you are, you know where you stand, and you know what it is you like and you don't like, and are at a point with yourself right now where you realize that you're comfortable in pursuing a path that others may not understand and may criticize you for, but it doesn't matter to you because you're happy with yourself and doing with what you're doing, and not concerning yourself with other things about you along the way? Do you feel like you've come to that point with yourself now, getting this far in this field, and experience what you've experienced, going through what you've gone through, and then surrounding yourself with the people that have more or less the same mindset as yourself, but understanding where you're coming from, and not having any sort of judgment over you because of what you do, because they themselves experience it with you and they understand it. So therefore you have that bubble, if you will, that gives you that sense of comfort of where there's a true understanding that doesn't make you feel like an outsider, if you will, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It does. So, that was like a lot. I don't know how to answer that.
But you're content with yourself.
Yeah, no, I am content. I am content. I don't know how to answer it because as far as like the spirit attachment side of it, I don't necessarily feel like myself 100% of the time. But when I do feel like myself, I am. Yes, I've gotten to the point after all these years where it's more about how I want to live my life and make myself happy more than I want to live my life for other people, because at the end of the day, as I say, it's just going to be me and my bones, so I have to be able to live with what I've done and be proud of the things I've done and feel accomplished in life and for things that I've wanted to do. And I know that sounds selfish, but it's better than just doing what everybody else always wanted me to do. So I feel like, the molder. That was funny. The older I get, the more I feel comfortable in my own skin. And like I said, if people aren't into what I'm into, then that's fine. Like we either don't have to talk about that subject, or we don't have to be associated with each other. And I don't mean that as a black and white, situation. There's obviously a lot of gray area in
Right.
there, so it really depends on the situation. But as far as that particular topic, it's something that we can just agree to not discuss, if
Right.
you're not into it.
I'm very glad that we did have this conversation. I'm very glad you've been very forthcoming and very open to, and also in answering my questions here, because you basically have educated me on a lot of things that I am really not familiar with at all, other than what I've heard on TV, may have seen in films, and researched some seldom cases here and there along the way where it leaned more towards the negative than it did the positive.
Right.
So to have you be able to explain to this to me about your background and the things you've experienced, and even to some degree some personal side of yourself as well too, in relations to how you deal with um, this respective field, it has taught me a lot, because I never once considered, not because I was against it, it's just that I just never once considered that I would ever talk to someone that does paranormal investigation, because I just was leaning more towards one side of, I guess, a field that I grew up with, that I am a fan of, that I am, what's the best way to say it? That I love. So to have this conversation really opened up my eyes in a lot of ways here too. And for anyone who's not aware, your book here, being Dream Within a Scream, I actually found a lot of things that I did enjoy about it here too. And to be frank with you, I wasn't sure what to expect, to be honest with you, when I got the
Mm.
book. I was hoping that I could find something that I would enjoy, but I'm going to be honest and say that I was concerned that I may read it and may not enjoy it at all. But
Right.
to my genuine surprise, I actually did enjoy with what I've read, and I've read it from more to start to finish, for the most part, start to finish here, because I have the bookmark that you sent with this book here that I have.
Mm.
So, and I've come to realize that a lot of stuff that I've read in this here did have a lot of profound meaning behind it, which I certainly did feel in reading it here along the way too, more so than I anticipated. So you do have a really wonderful gift in writing poetry, because I'm not the biggest poetry reader at all. I enjoy some of it, but it's not my go-to.
Right.
So I think that's the reason why I was kind of like, we'll see how it turns out. But to my surprise, I was genuinely happy with what I read, and I
Thank
actually
you.
would enjoy with what I read. So this is me telling you, thank you for writing a wonderful set of poems here that I did
Thank
thoroughly
you.
enjoy. Now I know you mentioned before that you are going to be writing some more books to more or less continue on with the series, if you will. So I'm hoping that if there's anything you want to say in closing here about what people can anticipate, I know people can reach out to you directly and want to order the book, because the
Yeah.
book is expected to be released this month on the 31st, if I recall
Yes.
correctly here.
Yes.
So if there's anything else you want to announce to kind of add on to that, to have people be aware of what to look out for moving forward from here.
Okay. So this is my book. I would say that it is heavy. It's a heavy subject of a book. It's not lovey poems at all. So, um, it should give a trigger warning too. However, I think that they're poems that most people can relate to. That at some point or another they might have felt or known somebody that has felt them. You can get them right now. It should be this week. You could get them through www.adreamwithinascream.com. They should be released on Amazon by Halloween. And thank you to, I want to thank Brimstone really quick for helping me with my book. He's a great friend, and he saw something in my writing, and he wanted to help me put it together into a book, and I can't be more grateful for somebody. So I'm thankful to him for that, and thank you to you for having me on here to talk about it.
No, well, thank you for coming on here. And again, I was hoping that we would get a great conversation, and you really have, like I said before, you really educated me. So I really mean when I say that. And I also want to give a shout out to Brim as well too for setting this up here for us to have us be able to take the time to converse with it here. So in the future, whenever you have the next book in preparation to be released, I would love to have you back on and be able to promote that as well too, and pretty much pick up where we last left off here.
I would love
And
that.
so if, the door is always open here for you. So for the cameras, I want to say thank you. I appreciate it. And I'll also make sure to have everything in the description down below for everyone to be aware of, so they can follow you on social media and also go onto the website as well too, to place the order for the book as well. But until
Thank you.
then, thank you so much and cheers.
Thank you.
All right.